The wedding dress hung in the corner of Sarah's bedroom like a ghost of dreams deferred. 3 sizes too big now. It had been her grandmother's, a cream silk with pearl buttons that caught the morning light filtering through her apartment window. At 34, she'd stopped believing it would ever serve its purpose. But sometimes the heart makes choices the mind can't understand, and sometimes those choices lead us exactly where we need to be. Marcus wheeled himself into the coffee shop every Tuesday at exactly 2:15 p.m., ordering the same medium dark roast with 2 sugars. Sarah noticed him because she noticed everything. It was her nature as a social worker to catalog the small details that reveal larger truths. The way he gripped his cup a little too tightly, how his eyes swept the room before settling on his laptop screen, the careful distance he maintained from other tables, as if his wheelchair required a buffer zone of solitude. For 6 months, she watched this ritual from her corner table where she graded reports and sipped lukewarm tea. She saw him flinch when children ran too close, noticed how he tensed when well-meaning strangers offered help he didn't need. But she also saw something else: the gentle way he studied an elderly woman's walker when she stumbled near his table, how he quietly paid for a homeless man's coffee without seeking recognition. The day she finally approached him, rain drummed against the coffee shop windows like impatient fingers. Marcus was struggling with papers scattered by a sudden gust from the door, his laptop precariously balanced on his knees. Sarah didn't ask permission as she simply knelt and began gathering the wind-blown documents. "You don't have to," he started, his voice carrying that familiar defensive edge she'd heard 100 times in her line of work. "I know," she said simply, handing him the papers. "But I wanted to." "I'm Sarah." "Marcus." He studied her face, searching for pity or curiosity or any of the dozen uncomfortable emotions people usually brought to these encounters. Finding none, his shoulders relaxed incrementally. "Thank you." That was how it began, and not with grand gestures or romantic declarations, but with scattered papers and 2 people choosing kindness in a moment when they could have chosen indifference. Their courtship unfolded in the quiet spaces between Marcus's carefully constructed walls. Sarah learned that he'd been a marathon runner before the accident, that he still woke up some mornings forgetting the chair beside his bed. She discovered his passion for architectural photography and the way his entire demeanor transformed when he talked about light and shadow, angles and perspective. Marcus learned that Sarah chose social work because she believed in second chances, that she'd never married because she'd been waiting for someone who needed her particular brand of stubborn love. He found out about the wedding dress, about dreams that had calcified into resignation, about a woman who'd convinced herself she was meant to care for others but not to be cared for in return. "Why me?" he asked one evening as they sat in his adapted van, watching sunset paint the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink. They'd been dating for 8 months, and the question had been building between them like pressure in a storm system. Sarah was quiet for so long he wondered if she'd heard him. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but soft. "Because you know what it means to rebuild yourself from broken pieces. Because you chose to keep going when stopping would have been easier. Because you see people clearly, their struggles, their strength, and you don't judge either." She turned to face him fully. "And because when you love someone, I suspect you love them completely, without reservation, because you understand how precious and fragile love really is." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a wall he hadn't even realized he'd built beginning to crumble. "Sarah, I'm never going to be the man who carries you across the threshold or dances with you at our wedding." "No," she agreed. "You'll be the man who sees beauty in broken things and teaches me that strength comes in more forms than I ever imagined. You'll be the man whose hands are gentle because they've known pain, whose heart is generous because it's learned the value of compassion." They married 6 months later in Sarah's grandmother's backyard, under a canopy of string lights and autumn leaves. Sarah wore the cream silk dress, altered now to fit perfectly, its pearl buttons catching the golden hour light. Marcus wore his grandfather's navy suit and held her hands as if they were something infinitely precious. The real surprise came after the ceremony, when Marcus's best friend wheeled out a custom sound system. "I know I can't dance with you the traditional way," Marcus told his new wife, his voice thick with emotion, "but I found another way." As their first dance song began to play, Marcus guided Sarah to sit on his lap, her wedding dress pooling around them like spilled moonlight. Slowly, carefully, he began to move them in gentle circles, his strong arms holding her close as they swayed to the music. Around them, their guests wiped away tears as they witnessed something more beautiful than any traditional dance. Two people creating their own definition of joy. But the deepest transformation came in the months that followed. Sarah had married Marcus knowing his pain, prepared to be his strength, his support, his bridge back to believing in good things. What she hadn't expected was how profoundly he would change her own understanding of resilience and hope. Marcus taught her that vulnerability wasn't weakness but courage. He had the courage to let someone see your scars and trust them, not to turn away. He showed her that independence could coexist with interdependence, that asking for help wasn't surrender but connection. Through his eyes, she learned to see her own worth not in how much she could give others, but in the simple fact of her existence, her laughter, her dreams. Their small apartment became a sanctuary filled with Marcus's photographs and Sarah's plants, adaptive equipment and handwritten love notes, the controlled chaos of two people building a life together from scratch. Friends marveled at their happiness, sometimes with barely concealed surprise, as if joy were somehow inappropriate for people who'd known real struggle. One evening, nearly a year into their marriage, Sarah found Marcus in his makeshift darkroom, developing photographs from their recent trip to the coast. The red light cast everything in warm shadows as she watched him work, his movements precise and graceful. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus looked up from the developer tray. "For what?" "For showing me that love isn't about fixing each other or completing each other," Sarah said. "It's about choosing each other, every day, and creating something new together, something neither of us could have imagined alone." Marcus reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in the red-tinted darkness. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside their small sanctuary, two people who'd learned to rebuild from broken pieces continued the quiet work of building joy from the raw materials of hope, kindness, and unexpected grace. They'd both arrived at love bearing wounds and carrying wisdom earned through struggle. What they discovered together was that sometimes the most beautiful things grow not in spite of the cracks, but because of thema in the spaces where light finds a way in, where two hearts choose to beat in harmony, where pain transforms into the deepest kind of understanding, and where joy arrives not as the absence of sorrow, but as its most profound companion.